Hey everybody, what's up? It is day 4 of our expert webinar series here at SPI and here on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited because to wrap up our week here, we have an incredible guest, Pamela Slim, who's going to be talking about utilizing and scaling up your IP. We talked a little bit about IP yesterday with Yasmin about what that means in terms of what you create and how to protect that in terms of legal things. We also talked about trademarks as well. But today we're going to talk about scaling that up and how to, in a way, begin to have more of what you teach out there into more hands and thus, as a result, have more business in your pocket as well. So this is going to be really exciting. For those of you who are here, thank you, Sandy, Kelsey, Andrew. We have a number of people watching the replay. If you're watching the replay, appreciate you. But let's bring in Pam Slim. Pam, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
I am super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
We have crossed paths several times, but never really had a chance to finally sit down and meet with each other. And we did that very recently on a podcast episode on SPI. And I'm just so grateful not only to have you here back again today, but to also have you as one of our new SPI pros, an expert in residence inside of SPI Pro. And we couldn't be more stoked and excited to have you and your 30 years of experience and expertise in there to help people. In those 30 years, what is it that you say is your superpower at this point? And maybe a little bit of background before we dive into the presentation.
For sure. I think the superpower, and it's not surprising, it kind of is a combination, I think, of a couple books that I've written, Body of Work and The Widest Net, in that two great joys that I have in life. One of them is really bringing great work forward. I have a phrase that I use of helping architects of liberatory change build a new future. And I think about that when we look at the ways that we work and the kind of systems that we have. A lot of things are really broken and we need to be bringing new, valuable things out into the world. So one part of what I do and I love is being very deliberate about what people create and why. And the second piece of that is how do you actually bring it out to the market at scale, especially through the lens of ecosystem and partnership, which is, again, why I'm so excited to be working with you. It's what I call a peanut butter and jelly partnership, where we have very highly complementary but non-competitive skills.
Yes.
Because I don't know about you, but I have never been able to solve all of my clients' problems alone. I'm always bringing in other experts. They're working with other people. So one of the many reasons I'm excited to join the community.
And as they say, your net work is your net worth, or your net worth is your net work. It's the people you surround yourself, and to do that in a, like you said, intentional manner where, in a way, everybody can win. And I love business when it's done that way. And our partnership is going to grow from here, which is amazing. And what are the kinds of things people can look forward to in this presentation today? Obviously, we're about to dive in, but give us the pitch so people know to stick around.
Yeah, so it's very apropos that we had an IP attorney here yesterday, because that's an example of somebody I work with a lot. When we think about, especially in this space, and the promise of, for example, smart passive income, who doesn't want it? Who doesn't want to have money rolling into their bank account? I think one of the things that we get a little bit waylaid by sometimes is just thinking about the benefits to us and how can we make sure that we have recurring revenue without necessarily thinking about, is the work that we're creating and sharing in an efficient way that's driving that revenue really giving the change that we need? Because from a brand perspective, people in the short term will fork over money to pay and invest in programs. Over the long term, if they start to feel like they didn't get a good return on investment, your brand and your business is going to go down. So I'm really going to be sharing some of the elements that I've learned in working with people for so many years about how to ensure that doesn't happen. So you do sell, you do get that mythological, it's actually not mythological with you, right? Passive revenue. People can figure it out through good digital marketing systems, how to get the money coming in. But then you also have people who are thrilled that they invested with you, who tell all their friends about it because it was such a good experience.
And that's a part of the passiveness, is if the thing you're creating is great, it's going to spread on its own. And that's going to remove you from having to market it all the time. And passive is possible, but it's the last part of the step. There's a lot of active things that has to happen. So we want to be upfront with that. But I think we're at a perfect time to dive into the presentation so we can get into this, because we're in this for longevity. I love how you and I both have done this for a very long time. You 30 years, me 16 years. And we want to equip people with ways so that they're not just doing this for the quick buck. They're doing this for the longevity, that long-term relationship, the higher LTV or lifetime customer, total value that comes in from each person. And again, where everybody can win. So everybody who's here is going to win for sure because we're about to dive in. So I'm going to go to your slides now. You do your thing. You can tap me in if you want to as well. And we'll go from here. And then if you have questions in the chat, be sure to type in question in all caps, followed by your question. We'll answer those at the end. I will save them in the question bank on my end, and then we'll go from there. So Pam, take it away. Thank you again.
Perfect. All right. So I think at first, just to be clear that generally the world that I work with people in is around professional services. So when we talk about monetizing your content, some of you who might have products, types of businesses, there are certain elements I think that can be relevant. It's especially relevant for anybody who is really selling services directly to people, of looking at ways that you can be monetizing your IP. So there's a framework in that growth journey that we call CQuad for short. I have an agency where we build licensing and certification programs. And as we look at ways in which you can really ground yourself of where you are in the journey, when you are looking to scale your service business through your IP, and your IP just meaning your intellectual property that can include methods that you have and specific processes, unique ways of doing the work. There are a number of stages that you go through in order to get ready for that journey. And so the first one is generally where you have done a great job of showing up, and I use the metaphor of magic, doing magic with your clients. So maybe you're a coach like I am, or you're a graphic designer, or you're a meeting workshop facilitator, and you can come in consistently and you can be doing work with your clients where they get amazing results. There's this alchemy that happens when you're doing your work that really feels like magic, where they're transformed, they feel happy with their results. And it's a really important thing to build up in your service business, so you feel good about delivering that consistently. However, where you're looking to scale, if everything is reliant upon you, the human being, having all that magic, there's no way that it's going to scale because you can't be everywhere at all times. So in this first phase is often where you narrow down and clarify a specific audience that's defined by a problem, challenge, or aspiration, something that you have that is really powerful, that you know is leading to transformational results, that has scalable components, which I'll talk about in just a sec. So when you get that, you zero in, you get rid of things that aren't as strategic, then you go to that next phase, which is codify. And the goal there is that your team or others beside yourself can still generate that same kind of magic, but without you having to actually physically be in the room. In order to get that particular result, you need to translate your ideas, the methods, the environment, the way that you work into specific codified structure so that other people can follow it. This is a stage for some people that can be difficult if you're like, I don't really know what happens. I just show up in a room, or I sit down in front of a client, I hear what they want, and I just intuitively know how it is that I deliver that to them. Sometimes that's why you need to have somebody else who's observing what you do. Sometimes it's why you need to document what you do. For example, if you work with people online, where you might record the call, notice the things that you say, analyze transcripts, things like that. But the output of that second phase of codification is essential in being able to scale through IP. Also thinking about it from the brand perspective, often if you are known as that individual who is the one who brings the magic. So we think of the difference, maybe Pat, with you, of like, oh my gosh, Pat Flynn is amazing. You want results, you need to work with Pat. Pat. Maybe that was earlier on in your career. Mm-hmm. And then you're really bringing in SPI, right? Smart Passive Income, where you're elevating from the brand perspective the approach and the method that you have that, yes, originally was born from you and probably amazing team surrounding you. But from a brand perspective, you want people to get more excited about the SPI way, right? Or the SPI community, because if it's all about you, and especially where you're bringing in other people to deliver your method, people who don't work with Pat are going to be disappointed. Like, oh man, I joined this community because I thought Pat was the main person that I was working with, because you're positioning yourself from a brand side as you as the sole creator of magic. Does that make sense? Kind of for the way you evolved the brand?
The other part about this that I'm thinking about is there were a lot of people who, when they saw me come up and I was the sort of person behind the brand, they said, well, I am not you, therefore I cannot do this. And doing this, codifying your methods, allow for you to say, no, 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 I am me because I implemented this way, and now here's the way, right? And so this is the big sort of mental shift that a fan base or an audience can have when following your work. But it is work to get from sort of, okay, you doing you and however magic you do it, and it does look like and feel like magic to everybody else, to, okay, here's the formula now to make it happen.
That's right. And there can be the own human journey of it where you're like, but am I not important anymore? So
Right.
sometimes for people who are going through this process, who are used to being centered as that one expert, have to go through, I think, a very, can be challenging, but a really healthy leadership step, which is to be a good steward of that method. And then to be excited when you see other people who are embracing it, because all of a sudden you begin to go to that next phase. When you have done codification well, this is where we need our amazing IP attorneys, because you want to make sure that what you have is protected. You want to make sure that you have trademarks on your different names. You want to make sure that you don't have other people's methods in there. Sometimes we do things utilizing other people's stuff, which is normal when we're just doing our thing. Of course, always appropriately. Let's say maybe we're licensing the material or we have permission to use it. When you begin to codify really your own thing, as much as possible, try to make it just the IP that you have created yourself. And that's where you want to make sure it's protected. Getting into that next phase, connect, is really about driving interest and demand for that magic. People begin to learn about this method that you have that is delivering the consistent results. And that's where you really want to be building an audience who is excited to learn more. They might hear it from a friend, they might share, they, attend a workshop or something you have, and they get excited about involving more people in it. In the context of my work and my books, it's really the widest net, where you're very strategic of looking at the ecosystem maybe of other partners who also serve your ideal clients, and you're sharing what it is that you do so that they can be sharing with other people. When you're talking about scaling IP, it really is more of a mature business strategy. And so you really want to make sure that you've done your work. Of course, it's ongoing. One never stops marketing. But you want to make sure before you move to more scaled opportunities like certification, that you have built significant demand in the market. So when you've done that, with a very specific push, especially as you get your method out, then you move to that phase of certify, which is where you want to have your methods embedded in the practice of the way that people do their own business. And you can facilitate that through things like licensing or certification materials, where you're teaching a very structured way in which people can access the material. And the whole point is so that they can bring it into their organization. But of course, from a monetization perspective, they're not just bringing it in by going to a workshop, loving it, and then grabbing the stuff and sharing it with their whole company. You have a very lucrative licensing agreement that allows them to do that. So that's kind of the big picture. And I would always love for people to identify maybe where they are on the path. Even if you're brand new starting out and you have a service business, I encourage you to be thinking about your journey from this productized service perspective. Codifying from the beginning is going to be so helpful for you so that you don't go in, 10 years into the work where you've never really been documenting what you do. And it's just going to be harder for you to make that scaling lift. So one of the things then that is important is we start to look at some concrete examples of how this works. So it is natural and normal that we all want to be thinking about profitability of our business. We want to make money. We want to have that passive revenue coming in. However, when you talk about effective IP, when you're bringing out methods in the world, it really is about the capabilities of your audience. The people who you're selling to, you want to make sure that you are really selling them something that actually works. I know it sounds like the most basic idea in the world, but I will say, Pat, you and I have probably seen thousands of $2,000 courses that litter the road of the internet. I don't think anybody sets out to rip people off. I'd like to think better of people, But if you realize you're not really focused on understanding what it actually takes somebody to transform, if you just sit in front of a computer, for example, and record 20 hours of videos, slap it up on a portal, and give a $2,000, ticket on it, you're very likely not to get the kind of results that you need. And so we have to be centering the experience of, does it work? Sometimes a one-page checklist is more effective at solving a problem for somebody than a $2,000 20-hour video course.
Yeah. And times have changed, right? Before, information was scarce, and so therefore just information alone was of value. Now, more information is not valuable. In fact, it is getting to the transformation, to the result faster is what is important, right? I want my tire changed now. I don't need the, person to work for an hour talking about his qualifications and how good he is at it. I just need the tire changed so I can move on, right? So I love that, and it's a very hard thing, especially for beginner entrepreneurs to do, because we sometimes don't believe in the thing we're creating. We just hope that it works, but you have to have that confidence and belief. And I have strategies to help get over that, such as just find one person that you've helped so that you can get over. Like, do you have any specific strategies for getting over that hump? Because that is definitely a big one.
Oh, for sure. It is. It's really related to, I think, the piece that I'll talk about next. When you look at what you need to have, is for a method to work, you have to repeat it over and over and over. It's a basic principle that you have in the world of training and development that I've spent the last 3 decades in. It's what you know as an entrepreneur, anybody who's been at this a long time. We can have a hypothesis that somebody is really going to like what it is that we created, that what we create is the answer to their problems. However, we don't know anything until it actually makes contact with a real person in the real world, who is not our best friend who's going to tell us everything is great, but is somebody who's taken out their credit card, who has invested, who has a critical eye, who can tell you if it works or not. So I am all about making sure that you have this right balance. That I think the hardest part, and it's funny, it's not even really a beginner strategy. In nailing the market fit, the first part, we call this your thumbprint. So it's really the essence of what it is that you have to have really effective IP. There's the market fit part, which is, will it sell? Are you putting forth something that is a solution to a problem that many people have, where you know that it bothers people, that they really want the problem solved? And then, do you have the skills in copywriting and really presenting it in such a way in which they can see the value of what it is that you have to offer? And that market fit is one that always changes because the market changes, like you discussed. It's not the same as it was when I started 2005, when I first started my blog, Escape from Cubicle Nation, way back in the day. So many things have changed about what people buy, why they buy it, what's important, and so forth. So we have to get that market fit that we're always adjusting. And then for the method, will it work? Is that thing that you're putting forward, in the way that you're putting it forward, actually solving the problem? And this is one from a service perspective that requires lots of iteration. So in our certification agency, we have an approach very much of productized services, just meaning that we get really clear about the process we use consistently. We love like a fixed price, fixed time frame. It works for us, it works for our client, where we can really dial in and make sure that we're providing the very, very best structure for getting results. It takes us iterations to go through that. Sometimes, 5, 10, 20, the more we do it, we're always really honing that process as we go through time. But when you're first starting, it has to feel good enough and solid enough for people to invest in it. The last piece of the model, will it stick, is making sure that you have something that's not overly complicated, that is shareable, that becomes a method and a way of describing things that is really easy for people just to tell their friends about. So it's the kind of thing that just keeps it sticky and moving forward. So we need to have each of these things happening at any given time. And as I said, having been in business for such a long time, I've worked with early stage entrepreneurs. I work with people who have been at it for 30 years. And we're always needing to be moving this dial because we get better tools. Now we have AI, whole different world in terms of how we can be both providing value and how also services that we have sold in the past are not needed because our clients are doing a lot of things now with AI that mean that we can't sell the same things that we used to sell. So these are things that you're always really going to be tuning into and dialing. So let's just look at a couple specific things, and then I want to look at some examples, and then you and I can chat about it after. So in the first piece of really listening for this market fit, you want to pay attention to things that your clients say, like, God, you know what would be amazing? Like, oh, I would just love it if I wouldn't have to think about what content I'm sharing, in any given week. I would just know what it would be. It would just pop up on my calendar, as an example. Those are ways when you're listening for that, or just, God, I just want this to happen. Or if I could just have this one thing happen, I know that everything in my business would be better. If I could just nail cash flow, if I wasn't so strapped all the time, if I could just get my clients to pay me, whatever that thing is, listen for that emotional side of what your clients are longing for, that often is pointing to a very specific thing that's missing. And like you were alluding to before, Pat, it's not often just, I need more information to learn more about this thing, but people are like, yeah, I get it. I just was talking with clients this morning for an offsite that I'm doing, and they're like, we've had plenty of consultants who come in and give us like the big picture and the strategy and so forth. And they're like, you know what we want? We want the details. We want to know how we can be reaching out afterwards, because they're like, we can sit around and we can think like the best of them. That's not what we need help with. We need help with the details. So listen for that kind of thing in order to then build your service.
That is really smart. Also, creating moments where those comments can occur can help you as well. If you have an audience already, that's great. That's a great place to start, because you can start conversations around these things. You can have, conversations on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram or on LinkedIn about these things, and then you can start to, again, pay attention. You're not seeding the answer. You want the answer from them, but you need to almost sometimes prompt them to feel safe to express what they might need more help with or what is bothering them, right? Do you have any specific ways that you like to research that if you're not in the same room with those people? Do you have any methods to discover that online?
Yeah, I use a lot my social channels as my independent research vehicles.
Yeah.
And again, I've been building audience a long time like you have, but I will say, is there one thing that just bugs you about marketing that you wish you could overcome? I ask it to my clients all the time. I pay real close attention as a business coach. I feel like it's such a gift of looking under the hood of so many businesses, because I hear the unvarnished response from many people. I would tell this often to my SaaS partners, with tech companies that I might partner with sometimes that sell software into small business owners. I'm like, I'm the one everybody's complaining to, of like the, blah, blah, blah software, I hate it when they do this or that. So listen, even when you have client engagements. I like to use tools like Fathom is what I use to record my calls. Now we're using that AI. You can get the summary, you can get transcripts, you can run the transcripts through with different prompts with ChatGPT. I think is one of the beautiful uses of it. Mm-hmm. You probably are having conversations where maybe you're not exactly tuned in to everything they're saying because you're focused on a different point as you're delivering a service. But if you go back and you look at conversations you've already had that are recorded, there is often tons of jewels there. And using ChatGPT, you can give it different prompts to pull out those things.
Yes. So good.
So really figuring out, do they want it? Are you positioning it in such a way in which it is compelling and people want to pay for it? Will it work? Is the essence of making sure that what it is that you build is the quickest path, is the most effective, it's the most engaging way in which you can really be delivering something. And that's often what takes some of the testing and tweaking to make sure that you're really deeply listening to what it is that people need and what it is that they want. I do this a lot in course development. I teach a couple of courses on Maven. If anybody's ever used that platform, I love it for cohort-based classes. And so each cohort, people might come back and they're like, yeah, that was really effective. I really enjoyed that, but I wish we really had like some working sessions where we could just have open office hours or something. And so those are ways in iterating of getting something like a class experience, is by listening to the feedback and making sure you have exactly the kind of steps that people need. Again, depending on the kind of IP that you're scaling, sometimes you have no direct delivery with it. It could be something that is totally self-directed, or it is something like a method that other people can use. But what you're testing, especially for those of you that get ready for certification, is you have a number of people with different background that through the consistent process that you've designed to certify others can still get consistent results where their clients are experiencing that magical transformation. If I could have a wish for the internet marketing world, it would be that people spend more time caring about if what they're selling actually works rather than only looking at the numbers about conversion.
Please listen closely, everybody. Because when you my favorite part about this is when you help people get a result, they start talking about it. It becomes your marketing vehicle. These become case studies, right? And this is why I wrote Superfans. You can grow from within the group of people you've already gained the attention of versus all the like, let's spend money on ads and SEO and all these things, which are important, right? Let's get new people to find us. But what about the people who are there now? Get them amazing results. And I promise, like, it just, everything downstream of that just is so much easier.
It's true, and it's why I get so nerdy. It's annoying to my kids. But I wrote about one of the case studies in my book, In the Widest Net. I took him to get braces. This was when Josh, our older son, got braces at first. And I came into the office. From the moment I came into the office, they were organized. It was clean. It looked good. There was art. They greeted us. They took us on a tour. That everything was so deliberate in the way they did the tour. And then they like showed the kids they had ice cream after they get their braces tightened in case they're sore.
Mm.
They brought us in, they gave us the whole thing, and then they stepped us right into an office afterward. Everything was beautifully orchestrated so that we saw exactly what happened. We understood, what needed to happen. They took the x-rays or whatever they do, in that case of my son Josh's teeth. We stepped into the room to learn about how, the finance part of it. And they're like, we could actually put him on today for $167. Do you want to do it? And I was just shocked. My jaw dropped because I was like, wait, we can get them on today and I only have to pay like $167? Because in my mind, I was thinking, I have to give $5,000 and we have to, do a follow-up appointment.
Right.
It was the most beautifully orchestrated process. I cared about it so much. I'm talking about it to you now. Yeah. McDonald Orthodontics in Mesa, Arizona. But also it is something I wrote about in The Widest Net because the overall experience was so phenomenal. And I asked them, I'm like, is this like somebody else's system that they use? And they're like, no, we actually have worked with the whole team to really look at this whole step in the flow in which people, in which our patients are coming in. So this is where you get, the kind of service and experience, not only good braces that work at a reasonable cost, but they have taken into consideration every single part of the service. And to me, that's the gold standard of what will make everybody talk about all your things.
Yeah, I love that. And even the example of the ice cream, right? It's like, okay, a kid's going to come in or a parent and say, oh, I know that when you come in for tightenings, like it's going to hurt, like that's going to be painful. You're already showing what happens after that and that you've thought about that. You're proactive. And it's like, hey, we're going to give you something to help ease the pain. And because we know what you're going to go through and we want it to be as smooth the process for you as possible. And then all the while, you're building this sort of like list of, okay, this is going to cost this much. This is going to cost this much. This is going to be, especially relative to perhaps other services or other experiences that you've had, you're already like, okay, this has got to be thousands of dollars. And then when they drop the price, it's like, of course I'm going to go in. Like it's no brainer at this point.
I know. I was like, you're such a good marketer. I hope you're a good orthodontist. Because it was like, maybe you went to marketing school and you're not really an orthodontist, but I was like willing to pay them anyway. So it worked. Josh has straight teeth. So did Angie, our second. Nice. But that's the standard to look at. So the last piece before I get to a couple of different examples is just this stickiness. So it's thinking about, for example, if I were, let me quiz you on this, Pat. So if I were, we were hanging out together in a castle and the power went out and I needed to light a candle with this like very big sleeve. And all of a sudden my sleeve caught on fire and I was like, oh no, Pat, oh no, my sleeve's on fire. What should I do? What would you say?
What would I say?
Does anything come to mind? If something's on fire, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, stop, drop, and roll.
Stop, drop, and roll. Exactly.
Yeah.
So stop, drop, and roll is an example of a sticky model. It's alliterative, but it's also directly tied to a method. So if you look at what is underneath each of those different parts of the function that was actually created. It was a response to a very tragic fire in which there was a young boy that died. So it was a particular model that was created in order to do education around fire prevention, or death from fire in this case. So stopping is like stopping oxygen from feeding the fire. Dropping puts you in the position to be doing that next step, which is to roll that smothers the fire. And so you can see, again, from the marketing side, kudos to those fire folks who got that message out, because most people know about that. And you don't even really think about it. As soon as we've made this very direct correlation between fire, stop, drop, and roll, which you can see is helping to support the method happening. And ultimately, that's the standard, what we want for the way in which we describe our thing, as to be the thing that everybody just kind of shares. It's the shorthand. Sometimes it's a visual shorthand, or sometimes it's a verbal one.
It's a great example. I love that.
Yeah. So we need all of that. You can have, for example, a method that really works, but maybe it sounds a little bit more complicated. And that's where sometimes we have those cool sticky acronyms and ways in which people can really spread it. So we need all three of those: market fit, model, and method, in order to have winning IP. So let's look at a couple examples. And some of these are my amazing clients. So in terms of codification, my client, Carly Cunningham, who's a brand strategist in Vancouver, Canada, she had a very specific way in which she do this deliberate process with folks in order to discover their brand. She calls it a surefire strategy. So she was smart enough to get the Canadian government to give her a $100,000 grant to go through a process of codification, because this kind of IP, this approach, is one that many, many startups need. And the Canadian government was recognizing people who had ideas that could be easily processed through certification and licensing, that could be helping, let's say, the entrepreneur economy in Canada, in this case, to get more entrepreneurs more successfully nailing their brands so that they could be more effective and generate more revenue. So Carly went through a very specific process of codification where every part of her method was codified. You can see it also was designed in a really effective way, so that now that she's developing the licensing and certification, it becomes really easy for people to be using that method. Now, I know not everybody gets a $100,000 grant. I do encourage you sometimes for things like this to be creative in the resources, because we know that codification takes time. But even if you don't have that amount of money in order to do it, it is worth the time to really be documenting and getting clarity. It means that you're going to have consistency of results in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. One interesting example for licensing was my client, Susan Cain. Some people might know Susan, who wrote the excellent book, Quiet, as well as the more recent follow-up, Bittersweet. And I worked with her for about 18 months to create what she calls the Quiet Revolution, which is really highlighting the natural strengths of introverts, and reducing the extrovert bias in the world. So Steelcase, that makes office furniture, licensed a lot of the core ideas from her book Quiet in order to build furniture that was specifically designed for introverts. Whoa. So this is an interesting example, where they call it Susan Cain Quiet Spaces. We know Susan did an amazing job. I think she still might have one of the top 10 TED Talks of all time, of spreading the word. So in our phase 3, if you remember, for connecting, Susan is one of the best people I know in the world for providing that compelling message to get out to people the importance of recognizing the strengths of introverts. But then Steelcase used some of that to create office furniture. So that was a really cool example where she's licensing that IP to them in order to create a different kind of a product. You can see also any Peloton fans, you notice they do that a lot. They had different people who are like sharing their books, or doing, musicians that are sharing their music. They're licensing that for the different Peloton instructors to have specialized rides and things like that. Some of my clients in Atlanta, Lamar and Ronnie Tyler, have a very specific focus for Black entrepreneurs. They've developed really powerful community, supporting their own community, and now they're developing more of a scaled kind of approach in which they can be bringing some of the methodology and some of their training into B2B environments. And so they're building specific packaging around how it is they can be creating certification programs, a lot of certificate programs that are really good for both entrepreneurs and teams of entrepreneurs, and for employees who want to really have the freshest, best kind of expertise in the marketplace. And so they're really finding a way of leveraging things that have been super helpful in their very specific community to find new markets and ways to be scaling that through certification. Jonathan Field, some of you might know from his great podcast, The Good Life podcast, and Sparketype, which is an assessment that he created. This is a beautiful example of what I call this virtuous wheel of always connecting and raising awareness and also building IP around a core idea. So Jonathan started a few years ago with a Sparketype assessment. This is an online assessment that is free. He built up a few 100,000 folks on the list of taking that assessment, obviously using some of the good modern technology of ads and things like that. With that, he was able to secure a really good deal from a mainstream publisher for his book Sparked, that is helping to illustrate how to utilize the results of that particular assessment, all about you finding your own Sparketype, the kind of work that you do that really brings you alive. He has a podcast sponsored by LinkedIn called Sparked that also raises awareness, like using Sparketypes. It's this ongoing marketing. And then the project I worked with them on is building this certified Sparketype training. So with something like an assessment, is built a training around that. So as more people are interested and they want to use that and there's more demand, there's a program for people to get certified as practitioners to be using that method. This is a really cool one. And I find for people that might be overwhelmed with the idea of like a huge method, maybe you're a organizational development consultant and you have huge, long engagements that feel overwhelming to codify, start small and you can find something like building a powerful assessment that can really be a powerful engine of IP. One of my favorite people, Mike Michalowicz, who's written a lot of great books, Profit First being one that I recommend to all of my clients. He has a very specific business model as well, using IP, where he will write books on a particular topic and then have a partner who actually pays him to license his IP, and then they're delivering the services. So you have the Profit First professionals for the book Profit First. For his book Clockwork, he has Adrian Doranson at Run Like Clockwork, which is an agency that basically benefits from the leads he sends their way from his speeches and his book sales, but they are a licensed partner that can actually be delivering his method. So Mike I did a podcast interview with him not that long ago about his model. It's a really great one for people who maybe just want to write books and don't necessarily want to have all the services that come along with it. So as you're looking at this, my best advice is start where you are, right? Kind of see where you are in the process. It's never too late to start, no matter how long you've been in business, but there really is opportunity to really scale your income if you're looking at it from this particular lens. So that's it on my side, Pat.
Incredible.
What about, yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, you broke it down and there are phases and we might be able to relate to one phase where we're at and we can see kind of where we're going. So this is great. I have some questions and it actually aligns with Dogs Dating and Tech here, who just asked this question as well. And that is, how can we learn codification? That feels like the most important. I mean, they're all important, but especially for the entrepreneurs who are in the SPI audience, for example, we are content creators. We have courses. We have perhaps services. We're coaches. But what is the process of codifying perhaps a little bit more specifically? And what does an end goal look like? I mean, especially because a coach might have several different things they could codify. Like, do we codify all of it? Do we codify one part of it? Can you help us get started on that? Because that feels like the most important step for our entrepreneurs here.
For sure. And these are things I'm totally happy to share and will share, I think, within the community. I teach a class, Productize Your Service Business, which is, it really goes back to this thumbprint method. So you do have to look at each part at a time. And the best recommendation I make is to codify one major thing at a time. right? So at first you do want to make sure that what it is that you're creating is saleable. So I'm a big fan, I don't know if you are, Pat, at like making sure there's water in the pool before you jump. So for
Yeah. Oh,
example,
yeah.
having a landing page where people might be actually giving you some money before you go all the way into development. So you want to be doing some of that testing at first to make sure you're really dialing into something that people need. And then the process can be as simple as, at first, to start, to lay out, you could talk it out and, capture yourself to have the transcript. You could just write out all the different steps of what it is that you're doing in that first pass of just saying, I do this and that and that and that. And then you can go back and you edit and you just clean it up and, often like tighten that process and the method for what it is that you describe in order to make sure that you have just the right amount of steps and the things that are really important. Depending on the complexity, obviously there's some nuance to this that, we'll get into in more detail in community. But if it's something that is pretty straightforward, it might be a little bit of an easier process that once you really get the right steps there, that's where you use the help of the model to look at some of the visualization. Again, with AI, I love the fact that it can be helpful for this. So for example, you could take the steps and you could say, ChatGPT, show me a couple of visual models of how it is that I would visualize this particular method. And that's where sometimes you can get that good visual part. So that's the best thing, I think, is to iterate, maybe start with something really small and dial it in. The litmus test is always where, as you train somebody else to use it, you have somebody else who's besides you who's using it that over time gets consistent results. So, you're a coach, maybe you're bringing in other coaches to help that are using your methods. And then you could begin to tweak in the areas maybe where you have not been clear enough.
Yeah. The codification process is very similar in my mind to if we're just creating content and we want it to be absorbed easily by our audience. If we're creating a YouTube video, for example, right? Okay, instead of just like, let's just work through what I always work through, let's figure out what the names of these steps are and what leads to what and what the hard parts are here so that we make sure to go to phase 2. And it's like, okay, we are not simplifying, but we are creating a roadmap of what it is that we're actually creating so that in the later steps, somebody else could teach somebody, we could certify it, etc. How do you balance if I'm coming up with a system, let's say I have a system and we have systems inside of SPI and stuff that we've taught. It's like, okay, well, how do I know if it's worthy of the other steps and bringing it to a certification, or will that just make a great YouTube video? Do you have any thoughts on kind of ways to measure perhaps, whether or not it should be just content or could move forward to something more serious like a certification?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it does come to a business model question, and it comes to where you do see the market opportunity. For a lot of clients I have that work on the B2B side, for example. So like their clients might be large companies, and let's say they're bringing in like a particular workshop to those large companies. And people are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, work. I love it. I wish we could bring this to all 2,000 managers in our company. I mean, that actually a client we recently built a certification for, that was that exact scenario. And so in that case, you have people who you're working with real time. When you're using that method that say, this is just so good, it's so sticky that I want to bring it everywhere. You might be surprised, or maybe not, how much theft of IP happens. Again, maybe not people trying to be horrible, but people might, even in really large companies, they like a workshop, they get the slides from it, and they just share it with all of their peers. So I say, if they're sharing it and they're obviously getting value from that content to have transformation and business value, why not monetize that? So if you put in front of them saying, you know what, for much less money than you could pay if you're hiring me, the trainer, to come in and train all 2,000 managers, we can do a train the trainer certification licensing deal, which usually it can be anywhere from 5 to 7 times less for them. But for you, it can end up being high 6-7 figure deal, depending on the size of the company, with much less work for you. So that's, I think, on the kind of the larger B2B side, it's part of the way that you look at your IP really fitting in some cases, like replacing a service that you might do. So if you look at, if somebody is a speaking coach, for example, and they know that there's part of what they need to do, which is actually being with a person, like watching them present and giving feedback. But a client's like, God, it would be amazing if I could just create a new keynote in 30 minutes instead of 3 days. And then you might say, ooh, here's something here that I could create some kind of a method or some tool to help people very quickly and effectively build their message in the keynote. That would be something you realize that not only would be good for you and your business, but also for other people out there, maybe, people in the environment who have to create it. So it's about the business opportunity. Think about it from like a learning objective perspective. When people just need to know or understand something, I tend to think of that being kind of content. I understand the high level of something versus I need to know how to do this thing. When you need to do it is a different level of instruction.
Right. It's the implementation versus information. And that's where productization, lotivations, comes into play, something that you said you were going to talk about. And again, I also love how you're thinking a little bit more widely. It's not just like, okay, our audience getting access to our stuff. It's other companies who can inject our methods into their work and their employees and what it is that they do. In the case of Steelcase, it was in the realm of something physical, but for most of us, it's going to be in the realm of something digital. And speaking of partnerships, you will be hosting a workshop on June 17th inside of SPI Pro for us, which we're really excited about. And for those of you who are curious, or maybe you've been here all week and you're like, hey, Pro sounds amazing because I can get access to people like Pam and Yashin, or Yasmin and Nasheen, as well as Amy and our other EIRs, myself included, then I would highly recommend you check out, oops, not that link. Hi, everybody. That's me up there. I meant that link right there, which is smartpassiveincome.com/day4, because we'd love for you to apply. And we're going to fast track reading your application so you can come in. And again, it's not just about content. In fact, the content is the last part of this. This is about connection. It's about collaboration. A lot of those things in phase 3 that Pam talked about. And you might be ready to help yourself codify something and get to that connection point. And then certification, this is always something that I always felt was like I wasn't qualified enough to do. It's like that's such a big step. It's serious. It's like for real businesses, and my business is not real enough to certify. Can you help us get over the mindset of like certification and how anybody can create their own certification for the methods that we have codified?
100%. Think of certification as a structured learning experience to ensure that people who are utilizing your materials are good stewards of the material, and that they have all the information, resources, support necessary in order to deliver the kind of impact, to their clients that they want by using the tool, or in some cases, within their own business. And so from that side, I feel very adamant, one of the many soapboxes I get on, that sometimes we worship people who have super advanced education, which I'm all for it. My brother has a postdoctorate from Caltech. I'm like, thank you, Brian, for getting all the education for the entire family. I have a bachelor degree. I also have seen amazing, super smart people who know how to do things and get effective results that is not directly tied to being the perfect, person with an MBA or somebody who has done. I know for a lot of my young mentors, as I call them, they can be fresh out of college that do things 25 times better than me, who's been in business for almost 30 years. So what matters is that you can get the results consistently, not that there's some mythological, person that tells you it's okay. In certain kinds of methods, if it involves compliance issues, medical issues, right, legal issues, certifying bodies, that can be a different case. But for most people, you really need to think of, do I have something that I get consistent results with people that I want to see spread far and wide so that more people are using this? And very often it's like, well, if it's not you, Pat, then who? And I guarantee you're going to be pissed off. You probably have been already, where you might look at somebody probably that you have coached and trained yourself, right? Who can come up and have the confidence because they believe in the method to put it out in the market. So to me, the main litmus test is, are you really being honest about if you have something that works? Are you committed to the process of really working the method? But don't hold back. You do have to have a depth of interest in the market in order to be sustaining a certification over time.
Right. That's definitely not a passive thing. I mean, you can earn the revenue more passively, but you have to stay active in the industry and continue these relationship buildings, and of course the marketing that goes along with that as well. A good example of somebody who's done this tremendously well is like Dave Ramsey, right? He had a certain way that he taught, getting out of debt, right? And he has a well-rounded brand. He has like, I'm debt free. He has the language, the brand culture, and he created a certification so that anybody could train to teach FPU, or Financial Peace University, which was the name of his program, and it works. And now he's got a 9-figure business in Tennessee, and he's on every show now, talking about. I mean, he's the epitome of this guy. Michael Hyatt did something similar with his platform university, and now he's into something else more physical, which is his Full Focus journal. But again, I always felt like this was something that was just for the people at the top of the industry. But I also have learned that if you create this can help you get to the top. It actually helps differentiate you, both in the exercise of creating this, but in having it itself. If there are two people that are exactly the same, and one has a legitimate certification program that has people who help with the results, I mean, you know which one I'm going to go to, the one that has proven results and has that certification behind it.
That's right. And I always say teasingly to clients, like, if it helps you, if you feel like you're going to artificially make yourself wait 10 years for some standard that you make up that is important in order to bring something forward, then if that works for you, great. But if you don't want to do that, and you care, again, always centering the person who you want to help, you believe in the method and you want to build it, then do it. Don't let anybody tell you that you don't have the chops to do it. The work, as you said, that is required is to be the ambassador for that method. You notice the role that you play in your business, again, is more, you are an ambassador of that method. It's not so much, look at me, Pam, I'm the world expert. Doesn't everybody want to work with me? But rather, here is this method that we're bringing forth. And the more people who are utilizing this method, the better. The prestige in the brand is actually from the brand. People say, ooh, they have that certification. They must really know what they're talking about. And that's where you know that you've really nailed it. But that becomes a little bit of a different shift of your business focus.
Right. Another person who is a good example of this, who I'm a fan of, is Donald Miller and his story brand framework. He has people who are certified to teach the story brand framework to businesses to help them focus on the hero's journey that is their customer, and businesses are seeing an ROI from that. So, I mean, there's no reason why you cannot do this, but a huge component of this, as we started out, was your belief in what it is that you're teaching. I don't think we could say that enough. And continual reps to help yourself and the market with the confidence in what it is that you're teaching. The workshop that you're going to be hosting for us in Pro in June, and everybody should check out that link right there to apply right now, by the way, is on partnerships. I'd love to just get a little teaser on your methodology, or perhaps your focus on partnerships, and kind of how might one get started with that? How do you feel partnerships kind of plays a role in all of this?
So partnerships is really around that phase 3 in the journey, which is around connecting and building an audience. So I have a very specific point of view that's really codified in my book. By the way, I forget the gentleman's name who asked the question, but one of the ways to make yourself codify is to write a book about it, even a smaller one, because it'll force you to really synthesize your ideas and give stories around it. But in the widest net, essentially, as you're thinking about who you want to reach and reaching people effectively at scale, my premise is if we center an ideal client that we have, somebody who we want to serve, there are other people. I don't know if you're a Marvel or DC person, so either the Avengers or Justice League. When I think, for example, of my clients, amazing thought leaders who have great IP, who want to get it out as far and wide as possible in the world, I want to identify those other Justice League members who are offering all the complementary kinds of service and products that are required for helping my clients get to their end goal. So for in my world, I work with IP attorneys every day, web designers, copywriters, marketing agencies. I'm always referring business to them, and they're always referring business to me. So from a partnership perspective, first, there's analyzing really who are these other partners. Then on a relational side, it's how do you begin to build relationships with them so that you know each other, begin to do that work. identify what I call watering holes, places in person and online where somebody else wonderful has gathered an audience that you can show up and all of a sudden have that connection. So to me, it's a very efficient way of building a network at scale, but it's still very relational in finding these really perfect partners. And it's just, I feel like I've gone on my soapbox a few times today, but my other soapbox is about really empire building, where we're just like, everything is about me. I want to crush my competitors. I'm going to, just have everything about me dominating and crushing people and having my fans and followers. Even that language we use, I'm like, my clients are my partners. Like, I really want to be, I don't want to be crushing anyone. And it is always more beneficial for me to know the partners in the ecosystem rather than trying to pretend that I can provide every solution to my client. So it's kind of a win-win, but no shock here. There is a method. So I will go through ways that you can really build it on a very consistent way.
What's your favorite watering hole?
It's funny. I've just come from 3 events, speaking at 3 events. A couple from my clients. I was just at a agency management institute, AMI, for marketing agencies for one of my clients that runs that. Events for me are it. I am an extrovert. So unlike Susan Cain, who's an introvert, nothing to me is better than being at an event, because you have all these different ecosystem partners. So you can have people who are in the room where you're in the right place, where you're somewhere where your ideal clients are. Everybody in the audience potentially could be clients, or many of them. Fellow speakers are peanut butter and jelly partners, because if your conference designer is doing their job, they actually are selecting people with highly complementary and non-competitive messages to give a total solution. And then sponsors are the people who you can meet with, who are investing to be a sponsor at an event, who also can be marketing partners with you. One story I tell during COVID, I got messages. Remember, everybody was doing everything virtually, and I'm, a GoDaddy customer like everybody else. I have domains parked there, and I got an email that just said that they were doing some kind of webinars from thought leaders. And so I just found the person who sent it, the person who was running them, somehow through a little internet research. And I said, hey, here's who I am. I have this method called tiny marketing actions that might be helpful for your customers. Do you want me to do a webinar? And they're like, great. So I showed up. They brought, I think, 4,000 people the first time. They liked it so much. We did another one, which was like another 3,000 people. They liked it so much. They invited me to speak at their customer conference. What did it cost me? 1 email. Now, obviously, I've been around a long time. When they went and checked out my work, I was not a brand new entrepreneur. But my point is, brands are often massively overlooked ecosystem partners, because they have all, GoDaddy has 19 million customers. So they can bring a volume of people to an event where you can be an expert that is going to be multitudes more than maybe just an individual who has a smaller conference. Yeah. So events for me have everything all together. So that's probably my fave.
Events for me as well. And my dogs apparently too, who are barking in the background.
They agree.
And I say that as an introvert from this side. It has been very important for me to not change who I am, but go and find the people who I could partner with, because I know it would benefit my audience. I'm able to endure that quote unquote pain that I have and the anxiety that comes with going to events in exchange for what I know the good that can come from that. And it has always been good. So I agree with you on that as well. Although there are many online watering holes as well, from Reddit to LinkedIn groups to DMs that are happening in different communities. And of course, we have SPI Pro, which is what we're trying to build, this perfect entrepreneurial, a very safe space, a safe watering hole, if you will, to have conversations, to find each other, to collaborate, to peanut butter and jelly, just the whole thing. So that's why we're here. And again, I'm just so grateful that you were able to come in today and spend some time with us. We're looking forward to the workshop. Everybody go apply down below, smartpassiveincome.com/day4. And we'll fast track read your application so we can get you in there and you can get in time, not just for Pam and Yasmin and Nasheen and Amy's workshops that are coming up, and office hours from Caleb to Jason, Terry, Matt. We have a whole slew of experts in there that are able to help you. And it's not one of those things that you have to catch them all. You just find out where you need to go next and find the expert that is there who can help you on your way. And that's why we're building this out. And we're not stopping anytime soon. We're adding more value in there all the time. So smartpassiveincome.com/day4. Pam, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I look forward to seeing you inside of Pro. Any final words or perhaps beyond PamelaSlim.com, where can people go to find more of you?
No, that's it. I'm so delighted. I really am so excited about it because, as I said before, I really thrive in communities, and I'm really excited to be connecting with people. So I'll definitely see people inside there. LinkedIn is probably the social channel where I'm the most active for work stuff. So Pamela Slim, I always say, like Shady, if that helps you remember my last name. Reach
Yes.
out and let me know that you connected with me via this conversation.
Pamela Slim without the shady, though. Yes.
That's right.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pam. Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks.